Hello and welcome back to Football Index Moneyball. We have another pick of the day for you, and for today's pick, I've gone for a former index darling whose price has fallen off slightly over the last year, leaving us with a very attractive entry point that I suspect will be disappearing next weekend when his league gets going again. In the video today, we'll look at how previous transfer speculations led to some media buzz wins, and how a recent move doesn't necessarily mean that speculation is over. How his past PB record and career stats could indicate that he's underperforming slightly following the transfer to a new league, which has left his price down at an 18-month low, now 40% from its peak. And to finish off, we have the usual target profit analysis with a great set of potential profits on offer from a combination of capital appreciation and dividends. Before we get going, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. If you want to be notified when new videos come out, you can hit the bell icon, or you can follow me on Twitter by searching for @IndexMoneyball. If you're new to Football Index and you haven't signed up already, then I have referral links in the video description for both Index and Football Index Edge, so if you use those, you'll be helping to support the channel and keep the content coming. The player I've gone for today is Nebil Fekir. Fekir is a 26-year-old attacking midfielder / supporting striker who's playing at Real Betis after a transfer away from Lyon for 18 million in summer. This was seen as somewhat of a coup for Betis and a surprise for most of the football community, as in 2018 he'd been on the verge of signing for Liverpool for 52 million. But the deal fell apart at the last minute, leaving Fekir to spend another season at Lyon before making this move. Now there's multiple reasons for picking Fekir. He has a proven PB record, and despite his lack of a win this season, the potential's still been there. There's also the fact that if things were to go well at Betis, it's likely that he would still be linked with other potential moves. But the main factor for me is the huge drop off in price over the last 8 months. I think a price drop is to be expected when he moves to Betis due to the reduced chances of MB, the lack of Champions League football, and from the lack of transfer speculation. But over the same period, the index has grown immensely, so for me these two should really cancel one another out. Fekir peaked at around £2.80, so that represents a drop of 43%. But for me the more interesting number is what the profit would be if you managed to get a couple of PB wins and return to that price. And from the current entry point, you'd be looking at a 75% profit on top of any dividends earned. So if we take a look at Fekir's transfer mark, we can see that he just has one trophy, but it's a pretty significant one. He has 23 caps, 2 goals and 3 assists for France, most of which came as a sub. This includes coming off the bench in 6 of the 7 games for France's World Cup win in 2018. And hopefully with a good second half of the season, he'll get a call up for the Euros and he could possibly push for a couple of starts if there's a few injuries. For his career stats, he has 209 appearances, scoring 73 goals and getting 49 assists. This works out to a combined rate of 0.73 per 90. Which is an awesome tally for any player, and with him just entering his prime years, this bodes really well for his potential to win PB, and also to attract attention from bigger clubs if he can keep it up at Betis. For his positional info, you can see that he can play anywhere across the front line, with the bulk of his appearances coming in attacking midfield. But this is about as much as you could ask for as far as versatility and goal contributions, and you can see why Liverpool were considering paying so much for him. Taking a look at his detailed stats, I've chosen to use who scored today. I usually try and get my own info and work out the key stats per 90 to try and filter out lower numbers from sub-appearances, but for a player like Fekir who averages 70 minutes per game over his career, I think it's okay to just take the per game stats that you can get pretty easily here. So the first thing that you'll see is he has a really solid set of numbers for shots, key passes and dribbles, with 2.6, 1.6 and 2.2 respectively. On top of these stats, another thing that I like about Fekir is that for Lyon he took set pieces, but at Betis, 38-year-old Yakin's taking them. If at some point Fekir should take over these, then I think you could see an increase in his price as well. I just want to take a look at Fekir's Football Index Edge Master Stats table info. We can see that he has 18p of PB dividends along with 14p of media dividends, and his average score is 93 with a peak of 271, which actually came back in 2018. So this would have been a monster score at the time, and interestingly he actually failed to win the PB on that day, so he was pretty unlucky there to not have more total dividends. But the thing I really like about these stats is the list of his highest scores on the right. Fekir has 6 scores over 200 and 17 scores over 150. These are awesome figures in my opinion, and considering that this came from only 88 matchday scores, that means he's hitting almost 20% of his matchday scores above 150. Now I quite like the table that I used in the last video for Cornet, so seeing as this was a more premium PB type player than most of my videos, and there's no immediate MB potential, I thought it was worth doing it again. In the process, I ended up adding a few columns that I thought might be important, and then I highlighted the figures which I thought were good for each category. Now I won't go into too much detail here. If you want to take a closer look, then you can just pause the video. But of all the players listed, Fekir had the highest number of highlighted columns with 13 of the 15 categories. Being in a European competition and percentage of PB scores over 200 were the only two that he missed out on, and to be fair, he was 4th overall in the percentage of scores over 200. He was 2nd in career goals and assists behind Ziyech, who's played his whole career outside of a PB league, which you would expect to mean he'd benefit from a higher score in this stat. So in my opinion, this was as good as being first, considering he had 0.73 versus Ziyech's 0.76, and he also had the highest total yield at current price level with 20%. This is over his entire time on FI though, not annually, just to be clear. But the other thing to mention on that is that with the revised dividend payouts, this figure would have been much higher, as would the rest of the players' payouts. The other 3 players who stood out for me on this list based on the analysis were Dybala, Tovan and Hazard, so if you do pause the video then they're worth a look. For my profit target analysis today, I've used all 26-year-old players from the previous table. For my comparable players, I went for Suso at AC Milan and Torgan Hazard for Dortmund. Suso's another player who's a bit of a downward spiral in terms of his price on the index, down 42p or 20% from his peak. But considering that Suso is the more expensive of the 2 players, but has lower scores than Fekir in 11 of the major categories, I think this one's fairly straightforward. For Torgan Hazard, it's a little more difficult. I actually think Hazard presents a really good option for this type of player, and he has better scores than Fekir in 4 of the 15 categories that I think are important. But Fekir has better scores in 10 of the remaining categories. One of which I think is the most important is that Fekir's a forward and Hazard's a mid. The midfield category is by far the hardest to win, so this is a big drawback. And then the cherry on top for Fekir over Hazard is his price, which is almost 15% cheaper. The 2 major advantages that Hazard has is that he's more likely to play in the Euros in summer, and Dortmund are in the latter stages of the Champions League. With Dortmund having such strong attacking options, it wouldn't surprise me if Fekir still got as many full games by the end of the summer overall. In the first half of the season, Hazard only played 80 minutes or more in 12 PB eligible games, and Fekir managed 13 even though he played in 9 games less in all competitions. For my low target, I went for Hakim Ziyech at Ajax. Now this is a bit of a strange one, because I think Ziyech's price has got a potential transfer, or speculation at least, priced in. But if he was to actually get a move, then I think he would be a lot more expensive. At present though, considering the only eligible PB games he has left this season will be the Europa League, and if he doesn't move in January, then it's likely to be that his price will dip before the summer transfer window. I think that Fekir should be justifying the price at or above this really. I think a bronze or silver top forward PB win, or a couple of solid scores to come 2nd or 3rd would be enough to get him back to this in the next few months. For my mid target, I have another interesting pick in Florian Thauvin. From the previous spreadsheet, you can see that Thauvin has been a PB monster in the past, winning 29p in PB dividends. But he's been out all season this year, so we haven't had much chance to see how his previous scores will translate to the new PB matrix. I think again this is a good target for Fekir, because if Thauvin was replicating his past results and he was playing every week, I actually think he's very underpriced as well. For me, a string of good PB scores or a gold day win would be enough to get Fekir up to this level. His PB record is fairly similar in terms of average and peak PB scores and percentage of scores over 150. It's only when it gets to percentage of scores over 200 that Thauvin pulls away, with 10.3% versus Fekir in 6.8%. This is obviously a pretty key metric, but another reason I think Fekir is a good buy is that I believe the second half of this season could lead to better scores for him and Betis picking up their form overall. They've signed another of my past pick of the day players, Carlos Elena, on loan from Barcelona, and I think that they could really benefit from having his creativity and ball retention in the middle of the park, which should lead to better results, and that would be more opportunities for Fekir to get better scores. Then for my high target, I went for Paulo Dybala at Juve. Now it's a bit of a theme with today's targets. Dybala's another player who I actually think is great value at his current price, mainly down to the fact that since Ronaldo arrived, he's not had as much of a role to play, only managing to get 80 minutes or more on 6 occasions in the first half of the season. If he was playing week in, week out, then I would expect to see him priced around the £5 to £6 mark based on the stats that I've put together on the previous spreadsheet. Dybala beats out Fekir and the rest of the players in most categories, with the exception being career goals and assists per 90, and any value-based metrics at the current price. So for me, although on paper Dybala is a better player, playing in a much better team, this is the kind of price I would hope to see Fekir at, if he can either find the form that he had at Lyon a couple of years ago, or if he got a couple of starts at the Euros for France, or if there was transfer links to a bigger European Champions League team. For dividends, I did include some for all 3 of my purchase options, I think based on the records, it's reasonable to assume that they'll manage to win some PB at some point in the next 12 months. For Fekir, I went for 0 in media, 8p in PB from either a Silver Star man or a Gold Top Forward win, then 2p in IPDs. I think these are all still fairly conservative though, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him exceed these, and if the transfer links were to start up again, then you could add in some media. So that leaves us with target profit ranges of 39% for the low, 58% for the mid, and 111% for the high. One thing I like about this player is the fact that on top of these 3 great targets, I see the risk of Fekir falling much further in price as pretty low. As I mentioned earlier, there's also the added benefit that if at some point he ends up on set pieces, then you'd likely see an instant boost. So overall, I just think there are a lot of ways we can win here, and barring a season-ending injury, very few ways that we're going to end up losing. As I think the drop in performance and the fact that he's in a less dominant team this year are already fully priced in. That's all we've got for you on today's pick. Again, if you enjoyed the video, like, comment and subscribe. Also, if you know someone else who might like the video, then sharing with them would really help me out. There are links in the description for signing up to Football Index and Football Index Edge if you haven't already. And don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel for more strategy videos and the other picks of the day. Most picks are long-term holds with depressed prices for some reason or other, so often the picks can still offer the same value, if not better, a few weeks after. And the research methods and reasoning can help if you're new to the index and want to learn to analyse your own players. Thanks for watching, good luck on the index.